So, gents, we're led to believe that Anthony Martial will be signing a new 5-year contract at Manchester United, close to agreeing the final points of it, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. A bit of a turnaround from a player that turned on a contract in October. Obviously, Jose's gone, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's come in. Is it a sign that he understands the club may be going in a direction he wants to go along with?
I think the feel-good factor around Manchester United has definitely helped. You know, these contract talks develop, for sure, since Mourinho's left the club. There's been a completely different feeling in the dressing room and all over the club, really. But I think it's very positive for him because it's an amazing football club to play for. And I think the fact that he's been playing a little bit more central or maybe playing up front in a 2 at times this season or under Solskjaer has really helped him. And, you know, he's been indifferent with Mourinho, like a lot of the players, a bit moody at times, you know, fallen out of favour, disappeared from the scene a little bit. But I think if they get something consistent from him and he's happy, you know, they've got a really good player on their hands.
He's the joint top scorer at Manchester United. And going off what Matt said, has the way that they've been playing allowed him to show perhaps not necessarily his full potential, but just what he can bring to the United attack?
Maybe for once, this contract isn't just about money. You know, perhaps they extended it. I think it was Manchester United's option to do it in October. He didn't really want to sign any longer than that. And so now he's been playing football matches, and as a player, that's what you want to do. So maybe the fact he's gone, well, look, I'm given a chance, I'm playing, I'm in good form. Yeah, I'm happy now. I will sign it. It wasn't about money all along, which is quite refreshing. I still think there's a long way to go for Manchester United. Yes, they've started absolutely brilliantly. Tottenham game, tactically, was a little bit different in the first half. Solskjaer did change it, but they could have lost that game 4 or 5-1. On any other day, they may well have done that. De Gea was absolutely exceptional. So I think there are stronger tests to come for Manchester United, and let's see what happens when they lose a couple of games or they draw a couple.
Well, Paul Pogba's mentioned the fact that he seems to be playing happy under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Is that the general air and mood that you feel is coming out of Old Trafford?
Definitely, and he seems to enjoy kind of mentioning that. You know, he's not shy in telling everyone that he's happy now and that things are, you know, the clouds lifted. And I mean, it was so obvious to see, wasn't it? It was plain and clear. And you know, you can't underestimate how important that is. You know, we'll have all been in dressing rooms where people haven't been happy, and we've seen the effects.
And
of
Pogba
that.
is so influential at Manchester United. He's the biggest commercial entity by far. There is nobody that comes close to him. You know, Ed Woodward increased all the commercial contracts from, what was it, 15 to 30 odd, whatever it may be. Pogba's on every single poster. He's massively important. They did well last season. Then he goes and wins the World Cup, and he comes back and he's not happy. So all the players are looking to him and go, well, he's not happy. He doesn't like the manager. He's not playing particularly well. And in the end, it rubs off on other players, performances go down, the club take note, and the manager goes. The moment he goes, Paul Pogba suddenly goes, oh, I'm happy now, and starts putting in performances.
I mean, the only disappointing thing for that with me is that you want to talk about world-class. People mention him as world-class players in that breath. I think you have, in order to be that, you have to have a responsibility to be able to play when things aren't right. You know, the top players can do that. You know, I'm sure Ronaldo or Messi or whatever would have been through stages in their career.
At Chelsea, he clearly wanted to go. There was an issue. They said, right, stay till the end of the season, and he put in a performance. You know, and they won the title.
That's important, but that defines him as a character of being world class. And that question mark will have to be over him. Yes, the physical attributes, the ability to play, all of that is, there's no question. But that is a question mark that by underperforming when it was bad, has to be asked of Paul Pogba.
Is that a question of the maturity of the player then, or is it that just the character of who he is, do you feel?
It could be either. It could be either. You're right, perhaps it is, you know, the maturity, but it definitely has to be his character. You know, he's shown that has been his character because his form, you know, overnight has completely changed. I know they might be asking a different thing of him, but, you know, it's not a luxury that you ask.
It's his approach as well, isn't it? The aptitude and the attitude that he's showing is completely different.
You know, all those players, there'll be jobs that they'll have had to do in their career that they didn't want to do. You know, they've been played in a position by a manager that didn't suit them to their best of their attributes. But the real world-class ones get on and still perform.
And going off what Matt's just said there, Danny, when they talk about perhaps building the team around Paul Pogba, is there a risk in a player that can behave like that in certain quarters?
I think you've got to have a player who's going to put a shift in every single week. He's going to have the right attitude. That's going to rub off on everything, on everybody else.
Number one, isn't it? Number one on the list.
And that's what Mourinho didn't have in that dressing room. That's why he brought in Zlatan. As great as Zlatan is, he worked his socks off in training every single time. Performance, excellent. OK, we all know what he was like, you know, with his Twitter and his Instagram and his quotes.
A real shy fella.
But he backed it up. And there wasn't a single game where you can look at Zlatan and go, he didn't put a shift in. Pogba, there are lots of questions over that. And is that the leader that you want of a football club? Is that someone you want to build the team around, that is that fragile, that can change his mind and go from, actually, I want to play in this game. Oh, I don't quite fancy this one. My performance level is going to drop. And I think that's where Mourinho struggled with it. And that's clearly why they didn't get on.
Well, the type of player that he is, I mean, you'd have been in strong-willed dressing rooms, the pair of you. I mean, would it have been accepted? Is it accepted because of the player that we know he can be and what he's been since Mourinho left?
Well,
and is it unacceptable
think
when you see him, not necessarily down tools, but being in a position where his behaviour, his ability to affect the mood of the dressing room.
I think we heard it several times, Gary Neville, Roy Keane. There was no one to stand up to him. Mourinho stood up to him and said, I'm not accepting this. It's not good enough.
And he's gone.
And he almost threw his toys out and said, well, fine, I'm not going to perform then.
But don't you think as a manager, there's one thing about standing up to it, but there's the other thing where you think, well, I'm here to manage this club, so this person needs management. I think that's the key. Sometimes you have to stand up to it, but in doing that, you've got to do it in a fashion or a way which gets them on board with what you're doing.
And I think that's
I never felt that was done.
No, Mourinho in the past had 4 or 5 top-class senior players that he could dig out, he could have a go at. Lampard, John Terry, Petr Cech, Drogba, Costa, whoever it was, and they would go, OK, you're right. And they would go out and they would put it right in the second half. At Manchester United, he didn't have those leaders. He didn't have those type of characters.
Also, you felt that he had a connection with them. He developed a personal connection where they would accept that from him and then go and implement it.
It wasn't taken personally, it was done for the good of the team.
I never saw that relationship develop in that way from the outside. Whether it did internally or not, I don't know, but from the looking outside in, it never looked like they quite had that relationship or the respect for
it was almost like once they lost Zlatan, who was his almost his leader, you know, his right-hand man. And they go, well, look, I'm having a go at Zlatan, I'm telling him he's got to work harder, I'm making sure he performs. I'm going to dig Zlatan out. This guy's a legend. So everyone else goes, well, if he's prepared to have a go at him, we all better fall into line. The moment he left, people were like, well, he's having a go at people, and they started to sulk, and they couldn't deal with it. And Mourinho didn't adapt to that, as Matt said. He didn't adjust his management style, and then it becomes poisonous very, very quickly.
Well, United currently sit 6th level on points with Arsenal. We've lauded Arsenal this season for an evolution, if you like, under Unai Emery, and we've seen so far take out the last 6 games under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and it's been panic stations, hasn't it, in Manchester United? But they're not too far away. I mean, 6 points off Chelsea in 4th. Is that what's a realistic aim for them for the rest of the season?
Champions League football. I think that's, you know, that is firmly, the crosshairs is on Champions League football for Manchester United.
There's 2 places, isn't there? I think we all accept that Liverpool and Manchester City are going to be probably 1 and 2. In which order, not quite sure. There's 2 places left for effectively 4 clubs, and they're all desperate trying to get into the Champions League through that.
They'll be looking at Tottenham at the moment and what's going on there, and they'll be and thinking, is it possible for us to make up 7 points, 6, 7 points, to get within striking distance of a team like Tottenham, Chelsea, to see if we can get that 4th or 3rd spot?
Well, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is quite obviously the man for the moment right now. Is he the man for next season and beyond?
I think it depends. Great start, as I said earlier. Phenomenal start, absolutely.
Do we take into account, I mean, Cardiff, Huddersfield, Bournemouth, with the greatest
of course you do.
games that they should be winning?
The first 2 or 3 games, the mood was lifted. It didn't really matter who went in. It was the fact that Mourinho wasn't there. OK, they still had to win those games, and a lot of that was down to the players. And he will have an influence. I think he's brought in Sir Alex to have a chat with him at times and, you know, put some old school disciplines and standards back into the football club. But now, you know, there are tough tests coming up. They've got to make it into the top 4, and they've got to really do well in the Champions League. If he doesn't, they'll be looking at long term and think, well, actually, maybe he's not the right man for the job. I still think he's probably 2nd or 3rd on the list at the moment. They will have bigger targets, but they don't. They've got time, and that's for the first time they've done quite well. Manchester United in that sort of recruitment. Gone. Let's just wait and see.
I think it's good that if. It's nice for Manchester United to know that if they don't, or they're not able to acquire those targets, they have someone there at the moment who can clearly steady the ship, or just have some stability that the supporters are warm to, that the players clearly like. Whether or not he's quite got that quality as a manager for that fine detail of, you know, winning cups like Champions Leagues and the Premier League, you know, that's still massively debatable. But I think they've got.
We'll only learn that about Solskjaer. Obviously, the atmosphere that he created at Cardiff, the experience that he took from Cardiff, but going into a club like this that he knows so well. I mean, best case scenario, he does wonderfully well, gets them into the top four. I mean, surely it would then be his job to lose, wouldn't it?
Well, you'd think so. If he was to achieve a top four finish from where he took over, you'd have to step back and say that's an amazing achievement, given the standard.
Won the Champions League, and then they probably should have got rid of him at the end of that. That might be the same sort of case with Solskjaer. He might not be ready to do that job long term. He might not be ready to start bringing in players. At the moment, he's managing something that was toxic, and he's come in and he's raised everybody's spirits. We're not going to know about him until the end of the season. I'm pretty sure Manchester United now, and obviously Ed Woodward, are going, right, this is our number one choice. This is number two choice.
Who is the number one, do you think? Is it Pochettino?
I don't see anybody else apart from that. Obviously, Gareth Southgate has been mentioned. I don't see why that wouldn't be an option to Manchester United. He ticks all the right boxes. Would he want to leave the England job? I don't know. He might not want it. Pochettino might not want to go, going into a new stadium and whatever. So I have to wait and see. But the fourth option, is Solskjaer that can continue to do it for maybe another 6 months, year, whatever it might take to find that right person.
Do you think the influence of Sir Alex, he's mentioned it, hasn't he, since he's come back, and what you hear from behind the scenes, he had a lot to do with bringing not just Solskjaer in, but the staff around him as well. Any new manager, surely, does there need to be a clean break from the shadow of Ferguson? Or, as Gary Neville says, it's built in a certain way, it always will be that way, and whoever comes in has to learn to deal with that?
I mean, his presence, I think, will always be felt at the football club, and probably rightly so. But that's up to the manager, isn't it? That's up to the strength and the confidence of the manager to embrace that and to use it to, you know, to take that on as part of Manchester United, but still have their own identity and be strong enough to play and almost have the respect to be able to overcome that, but work alongside it as well, because it will always be there.
I think when you listen to all the players that played under Fergie, they all talk about standards and how high those standards were. And that's the key of any successful team. You know, you're on time, you work hard. When Rio left Leeds and went to Manchester United, he went, oh my God, you won't believe in training. The standard of training is just up 5 or 6, not one level, 5 or 6 levels. And if you give the ball away, players are slaughtering you. And it was tough.
Solskjaer that slotted in first.
Well, yeah, exactly. and it was tough. And that's the sort of standards that are set at Manchester United. Then tactically, it's up to the manager to do what he wants. But I think that's what he's trying to instill, is those discipline, old-school standards of just doing your job 100%.
But that's the presence and the shadow that you're talking about that you could use to your advantage. They're the type of
not
messages...
see it as the albatross, see it as something to really push the players on.
Absolutely, you have to look at it in that way, because it is a really positive thing.